Welcome to Richters Seminars. This video presentation is from a series of free educational seminars on herb and garden topics offered each year at Richters.
So thank you very much for all taking the trouble to come out on what's really a very nice day. Thank you, Conrad, for the very pleasant introduction. I hope I can live up to your marketing. I'm here today to talk about Echinacea. 10 years ago, if I'd been asked to talk about Echinacea, first thing I'd have thought of was, who knows how to pronounce the word Echinacea, and where am I going to go? It would have been some exotic conference somewhere in the middle of nowhere, where about 6 people who actually knew what it was about would be all sitting around at a campfire discussing it. Well, in the last 5 years, Echinacea has become, the word Echinacea has become almost as common as the word daffodil or any kind of flower. And, people have often asked me why it is that Echinacea has become so popular. Why do so many people buy it? Why do so many people use it? And the best answer I can think of, really, is that Echinacea works. And that's why it's been so successful. Many people that actually think herbs are some sort of off-the-wall kind of thing often say, well, people buy these things and it's just it's not quite right, it doesn't always work. Well, unfortunately, that would have to demand that those that buy these products are a little bit slow and not quite with it. And obviously, I wouldn't like to accuse any of you. So, Echinacea. Conrad has very kindly supplied me with 3 little Echinacea plants. I've got a photograph here, so you can actually see what it actually looks like when it's blooming. Do you have this flower in your garden? I guess so, eh? The purple cone flower. This is Echinacea purpurea, in fact, this particular one I have here. It's a very, very common garden plant. The species Echinacea is quite unique, the whole group of plants. It's unique to North America. The Echinacea actually exists nowhere else. Unless, of course, they've been taken from North America, planted elsewhere. And specifically unique to the southern and central plains of North America, right down to Dakota, down to the Midwest, and as far north as right up in Alberta and Saskatchewan. In fact, if I could be a little bit patriotic here, and as you can tell, I wasn't born here in Canada. I'm transplanted Canadian, for which I'm very proud. Glad to be here. England was a lovely place, which I'm glad I live here now. But I'd like to say that Canada has a worldwide reputation for the quality of its Echinacea plants. In fact, Canada has a reputation worldwide for the quality of most of the herbs produced here. Particularly the 3 most potent medicinals in the North American pharmacopoeia, which happen to be Echinacea, and North American ginseng, to name 2. I have an information sheet here. Everyone got one? Anyone doesn't have one, they can ask later on and we can get one picked up for you. I've got 3 varieties of Echinacea here. I've got Echinacea angustifolia here. You can just about see it. I'll give the media guy a go. See in the camera there? But it's got to earn his money, right? It's free ticket. This is Echinacea pallida, the pale purple cone flower. If you look at your leaflets, you actually can see pictures of 2 of these. On the front, there's this same picture on the front of your leaflet of Echinacea purpurea. And if you look on the back of page 1 there, you'll see a row. This picture here, that's Echinacea pallida. And that's Echinacea purpurea. It's very easy to spot Echinacea purpurea. It has a beautiful broad leaf. You can see it. If you look on the photograph that's on your little leaflet I gave you, you can see the leaves, how broad they are. Very distinctive, slight hairy leaf. And if you look at the pallida, you'll see very clearly it's a narrow, long leaf. And if you look at the photograph, you might just be able to see the narrow, long leaf in the photograph. I'm trying to get used to this tether. I'm not used to standing in one place with this microphone. So if you look closely, you'll be able to see the leaves, I think, and you'll see what they're now. Now, there are three kinds of Echinacea traditionally used in medicine. Echinacea purpurea, Echinacea angustifolia, and Echinacea pallida. And what I'm going to do today, what I'm hoping to do today is, I'm hoping that when you all leave here, you'll be able to tell the difference between the different types of Echinacea, and you'll have an understanding of which ones are more suitable for which kind of case. And what I've got here, I brought with me a sample prepared from the roots of each of these plants. Now, everyone says to me, what's the best part of the Echinacea? What's the best part to use? Well, the Native Americans always used the root of Echinacea. They would collect the roots in the fall, late in the fall, after the plant had died back. That's when the roots are most potent. And they would primarily collect the roots of the species angustifolia. Echinacea angustifolia is very easy to tell from the Echinacea pallida. Echinacea angustifolia very rarely grows above 24 inches high, so it's only about so high. And the flower florets always point straight out like a little star. Very, very distinctive. If you look at the picture of the pallida, okay, you'll see that the flowers droop, and they're very tall. They're over 3 foot tall. That's a very easy way, most of the time, to tell that you have angustifolia or pallida. Another really very simple, easy way to tell the difference between Echinacea pallida and angustifolia is the taste of the root. What I have here is, I'm going to pass this around, and what I'd like you to do, I'll give you a demonstration on how to do it. I didn't have any cups, but what you can do. Can I ask my assistant to come here, please? Serena, please come and help me. I brought my daughter with me to help. She's underage, so if there's anybody from the government, please don't record me. And what I've got here, this is Echinacea angustifolia extracted from the root. So what I'd like you to do is put a little bit on your hand, 2 or 3 drops, and then taste it, and then pass it on, drop right. So what you can do, Sweeney, you can to that lady over there, please, and drop it, and let it try it. This lady here, yeah. Yes, I guess like Mutton Jeff, isn't it? Right? Serena, actually, she's 2 years old. She's quite familiar with Echinacea. She spends a lot of time wandering around in the field with the Echinacea. So just pass that around and taste it. One of the most interesting things about Echinacea, I guess you've all heard of the Echinacea tingle, that great strong tingling that you get. Well, that's a really great way to tell if you've got Echinacea angustifolia or Echinacea pallida, because Echinacea pallida has no tingle. Very distinctive. It has a very different flavor, and you won't get a tingle from it. It's a very full, interesting flavor, isn't it? And again, once everyone's left here, they will be able to recognize by taste and smell a good quality Echinacea product. There are lots and lots of Echinacea products on the market. There are many Echinacea products made from the leaves, in fact. Now, at Faunus Herbs, we've never made Echinacea tinctures from leaves and flowers. We've been asked on several occasions, but we've always refused to do it, because they are the least effective parts medicinally of the Echinacea plant. By far, the best part of the plant is the root. And the roots really need to be collected in the fall, as late in the fall as you can get, or in the very, very early spring. The simple reason for that, Echinacea is a perennial plant. If you take some away from here, and I strongly urge you to see if you can take some plants away from here, because they're very, very easy to grow. They're about, anybody ever grown marigolds, calendula? You know how easy they are? These are probably easier than marigolds and calendula. You would just stick it in the ground, and as long as it doesn't get waterlogged, you'll have no problem. It's a perennial. It'll take 3 years to develop into a big bushy plant like this. And at that time, you'd be able to harvest the roots and make your own Echinacea. We've got some samples. I'm going to pass these around. And what I'm going to do at the end of the discussion here is to ask you to tell me which you feel is the best Echinacea. dry, the tincture, I got samples of all, and you'll be able to tell me yourselves which ones are that. I even have a sample of what's very popular now, a standardized extract that everyone is currently selling. And I'll explain a bit about standardized extracts. Excuse me, standardized extracts is a very funny word. So Echinacea purpurea is the easiest to grow. If you've never grown Echinacea before and you want to grow it, I suggest you take the Echinacea purpurea. It will self-seed, and in 3 years you'll have, from 1 or 2 plants, you'll have hundreds of little seedlings all the way around. You'll be able to dig them up in the spring and plant them out. And before long you'll have thousands of plants, and I'll put nothing in the door so you can buy your Echinacea. And then you'll be really grateful you came here. Everyone tasting that? Isn't it interesting? No tingle? Quite distinctive, isn't it? Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass. I want this one to go through the same way of my assistant is going to perform one of her little functions, I think. Excuse me. Oh, thank you. There you go, myself. This one I've got here is Echinacea purpurea. They will make their way round. I didn't realize we have so many people, otherwise I would have brought a sample. And the sample I have there is a sample of Echinacea purpurea is made from the roots of Echinacea purpurea. If you taste it, you'll find that it tastes quite different than the Pallida. Now, you know, these days, from 20 years ago, when Echinacea was practically unknown except by herbalists, to today, where you can find Echinacea shampoos, Echinacea milkshakes, Echinacea soup. Yeah, chicken soup with Echinacea. Yeah. Yeah. I nearly fell over when I saw it. Ah! Very amusing. So, I mean, we can see that Echinacea has become very popular. And one of the things we're going to have to be very careful about with Echinacea now it's very popular is to try and help people to understand that Echinacea is not a substance that you can take continually all the time. If you read the information sheet I've sent out, it explains very clearly what to take Echinacea. Echinacea, more generally, is known as an immunostimulant or an immune enhancer. And what it basically does, it stimulates the immune system to produce more of the natural substances it uses to protect itself from bacteria, viruses, and ailments that attack the body. So every time you take 20 or 30 drops of Echinacea, and Echinacea is a little bit like having I guess most of you guys drink coffee. And when you drink a cup of coffee, it gives you a little rush and you feel full of energy. But if you drink coffee all the time and you're constantly drinking it, you don't get that effect, do you? We've all got friends that don't drink coffee and they accidentally drink some and they're running around like cartoon characters because they're not used to it and it's just stimulant. Well, Echinacea works in a very similar kind of way. If you take it all the time, the constant push and energization of your immune system, it gets to the point your immune system gets worn out. So in effect, the Echinacea worse than anything else, doesn't actually work at all and can weaken your immune system. In Europe, particularly in Germany, Echinacea, for example, is not recommended to be used by children under 5 to 7 years old. And if you think about that, it's quite simple really. Children have not developed their immune systems. They're not up to par, and you have to be very careful if we're going to stimulate immune systems of children because they're not developed. We don't want to hinder their development in any way. So Echinacea is not really a substance that I personally, I don't think I've ever given Echinacea to my daughter. If she was sick, I'd get her to go out and play in the Echinacea field because she could breathe in the aromas and the flap and the scent and get any immune stimulation she needs that way. But as to actually taking it internally in any strength, I would not recommend it for children. I know, yes, I have seen products out there that say kids Echinacea, but I mean they also sell Coca-Cola with caffeine in it for kids, don't they? QED. things I bought with me today, I bought for later on, because I have to pay the rent like everybody else. I brought some bottles of Echinacea and some different herbal products for people to try. Take home with them, I guess. Now, Echinacea alone isn't going to help your immune system. I mean, it will help to some degree. But one of the things that we have to look at is the additional bits and pieces that go along with taking Echinacea. One of the reasons Echinacea is so effective today is that our immune systems are constantly bombarded by the environment, by toxins in our food, by the stress that we're under. So this is one of the reasons Echinacea is such a popular and effective medicine. All our immune systems are under attack. But there are other ways you can help your immune system other than just taking Echinacea. If you read the leaflet, for example, it gives you some ideas on diet and avoiding certain substances. Is that sample working its way around? This group looks a little dead here. You taste it? It's quite interesting, the difference. How many people have tasted it now? We're going, oh, I gotta get the, I'm saving the best for you guys. I got here Echinacea angustifolia. This is the roots of Echinacea angustifolia. Now, you try this one. Are you brave? So when we see what happens to these guys, you guys won't want to touch it. Okay. So how many of you actually have Echinacea that you have growing in the garden? Oh, quite a few of you. Okay, well I'm going to tell you now how you can make your own Echinacea tincture, okay? First thing you need to do for Echinacea is to let it grow for 3 years. Now anybody who's just bought some plants, that's the hardest thing in the world. It's a little like my little girl, not, having to wait for dessert when she's eating something that she doesn't like. And 3 years seems like a very long time to wait to actually harvest your Echinacea roots and make the tincture. But let me really make this very clear. If you make Echinacea products from first-year Echinacea plants and second-year Echinacea plants, it's not very good. The so-called active principles, the potency of the plant, it really comes into its own in the 3rd year. And the actual root of the Echinacea will be twice, almost 3 times, given a good season, plenty, no drought or anything else, will be twice to 3 times the size in the 3rd year. So even if you don't want the most potent Echinacea you can get, if you want to get lots of it, wait till year 3. If you go to 4 years and 5 years, you may get a bigger root, but then there's a slight problem. It starts to grow woody, and you get a different set of compounds. And those compounds, again, are not quite so effective. They have different properties, some liver properties actually, which is quite interesting, but not so much immunostimulating properties. So the prime time to pick Echinacea to harvest is late in the fall of the 3rd year, followed by early in the spring of the 4th year. And you really are best waiting until you've had a quick sharp frost. Anyone grow turnips or the sweet root vegetables? They always taste so much better after a frost. It helps to change the sugars in them. Echinacea is the same way. If you wait, we tend to harvest ours as late as possible, late November, even into December sometimes, if the weather permits. So those of you growing in, what you would do is you would let your plant die back. If you want to collect seeds, and I'm sure you all do, isn't that interesting flavor?
Yeah.
Oh, wait till you guys get this one. See, I gave them 2 different ones there. I got no response, but I can see, look, they're all bouncing around like crazy. Nobody from the drug squad here? Okay, so yeah, they're quite different. They're all quite different. Now, if you want to collect seeds from your Echinacea, the best time to collect the seeds is in the 3rd year. Again, if you collect seeds, sometimes your Echinacea will send out flowers in the first year, and in the 2nd year you'll get flowers. But to get the best seeds, you're best waiting until the 3rd year. Now someone says to me, what's the best way to tell if the seeds are ready? Well, I leave it to the experts, and the experts are the birds. So all you have to do is wait in the third year till you see all the birds going onto your Echinacea stuff, and you know they're ready. So you've got to be quick, because the birds will eat them. Usually it takes them, I've seen the birds strip a 5-acre patch of Echinacea in one day. So you've got to be really on the ball. But believe me, when the birds are crowding on those seeds, they're ready. And that's the time to pick them. I mean, it's really a simple matter of just observing nature and seeing how it goes, you know. I mean, I've had people, you know, stand around there with, oh, we pick them now, and, you know, we send them to the lab and all this. The bird method's always been the best. Every time.
Excuse me, when they start falling off themselves, do you know then that they're ready?
The birds will eat them just before that. The birds will be in right at that time when they're right to go. Have you ever grown hazelnuts? I've grown hazelnuts. Ever grown hazelnuts? You know how you tell your hazelnuts are good? The raccoons eat them. I mean, that's for the squirrels. They all know when these things are at their best. I mean, you know, as far as those animals are concerned, they're gourmet diners.
What can you do to prevent them doing that? You tie lines or put nets?
Okay, well, commercially, people do use nets and that. I mean, from my point of view, I've always been quite willing to share them with the birds. But what I often do is send my staff out there, you know, they're all wearing white coats and everything, in terms of throwing them away. I guess they feel they're going to be taken away in a white van. How's it going with the angustifolia over here? If any of you guys come down with a cold or flu, my reputation is ruined. And how's it? Isn't it interesting, once again, the Polita has no tingle. That's quite a different, and the Echinacea purpurea has some tingle, you would have noticed that. It's different. But which of you trying the angustifolia? I just hope nobody's going for dinner afterwards. I'm just going to read my notes. Have a quick glance here. This is what I gave you here. There's a very good information for how Echinacea and the immune system works here on the sheet, so it will save my time in explaining it. There's also a piece here on choosing your Echinacea. Everyone asks me, they say, what kind of Echinacea should you buy? The kind of Echinacea you should buy is Echinacea. The most effective way to take Echinacea, if you can do it, is to chew a piece of the fresh root. That's the best way. So rather than making any product, go out in the fall, dig it up and chew it. Or keep them in your fridge. Anyone ever grow burdock or keep burdock roots in the fridge? Oh, there's two more weirdos, just like me there. And you can keep them, carrots you can keep in the crisper for weeks and weeks, just like carrots. People like carrots. And you can eat them through December, January fresh. That's the best way to do it. The next best way is to make a tincture with them. The best tinctures are tinctures that contain less than 30% alcohol. If you have too much alcohol in your tincture, it interferes with the proper suspension of some of the active ingredients. Some tinctures that you actually see marketed contain alcohol as high as 70%. These tinctures are best avoided because what you're actually buying there is 70% alcohol. The tinctures that we make, the alcohol content varies between 25 and 30%, which is about the correct way to do it. You should look for tinctures that are made exclusively from the root. I'll give you an example. These tinctures here that we sell, this is our brand name. We make lots of others, by the way, all sorts of companies. If you ever see an Echinacea that says certified organic and made just with root, probably our one we made. If you hold it up to the light, you should not be able to see through it. If you can see through it, that's a very inferior tincture, poor quality. Usually it means you've diluted it with alcohol too. There was one product that I picked up in the fall, I won't mention the name, I won't embarrass the company. But they had a tincture, it wasn't bad, it was quite good. It was a pale brown colour. And I picked up a sample of the same product just the other day, and it was about 4 shades lighter. And what they'd done, because the demand for Echinacea is so high, what they'd done was dilute it with alcohol to make it spin out. This is one of the problems, unfortunately, in our industry. We do have problems like that in the herbal products industry because it is unregulated. This would be one of the advantages of regulation in the herbal industry. And myself and my company, I have no problem with regulation for the herbal industry, provided those regulations are appropriate.
The OCIA for regulations.
Yes, OCIA, okay. Well, these tinctures that we produce here are known as certified organic. It means that we've grown them organically and manufactured them organically to a set of standards that are checked and inspected. And what happens, we have an inspector that comes once a year. The inspector can spend up to 2 days at our location. They will inspect our manufacturing process, our growing process, to see that we meet very, very strict set standards so that the products contain no traces of added chemicals, poisons, toxins, and our processing keeps the product as close to nature as possible. And though that's what's called a certified organic product. It's very easy for anyone to say that their product is organic. It's a lot more difficult to say, yes, my product's organic, and I've had the plant inspected, and I've had everyone in to examine my process. Because if you really are confident in the organic quality of your product, then you would welcome an inspection and a verification of that. Because it helps you in your marketing, I guess. One of the things that's happening today is we're moving very much, there are many products out there called standardized extracts, where you would have where the manufacturer would say to you, this product is standardized to contain 5% of this active ingredient. Well, I'm going to tell you a little story. I'm going to take Echinacea as an example. I've been working with Echinacea since the 1970s. I've been growing it since 1984. And when I first started working in Echinacea, the active ingredient was a substance called Echinacea. 10 years ago, the active ingredient in Echinacea were the complex polysaccharides. Today, the active ingredient in Echinacea, technically, is a substance called isobutylamide. Now, if you'd have made a standardized Echinacea 20 years ago, you'd have standardized it to contain so much of Echinacea B, wouldn't you? That would have been the so-called active ingredient, so you'd have made it with that. 10 years ago, you'd have concentrated on the complex sugars, and you'd have standardized on those. Today, it's standardized on the isobutylamide. So you tell me, are any of those substances as good as plain, fresh, clean, simple Echinacea? How can they be? Makes no sense, does it? In fact, I'm going to put that to the test right now, because I always love doing this. I actually do this quite often at practitioner meetings where we get lots of doctors and practitioner folk. And a lot of these guys all like standardized products because, you know, it sort of sounds good, doesn't it, standardized? You know, I've got so many bits of orange in my orange, or I've got some standardized extracts of Echinacea here. This standardized extract is standardized to contain 4% echinacea. That's what it's standardized to. This extract costs over $200 US a kilo to buy. I'm going to pass it around, and people would like to taste it, what I might do, if I have a sheet of paper here. You can use your sheet of paper, just put a little tiny bit on it, put your finger to it and taste it. And then when you've done that, I want you to tell me how close it resembles the Echinacea I have in the bottle. Perhaps I can sort of ease the argument a bit. How many people here have grown potatoes? Yeah, how many? Most half of you, 50%. Now, I grow potatoes, and there's nothing nicer than when you wait and you dig your first potato up, and you cook it and you've got that beautiful aroma and scent, and the taste, isn't it? It's so indescribable, isn't it? Can you get that taste and flavor when you go to the store to buy your potatoes? No. Does it taste like that when you get last year's potatoes? Does it taste like that when you get instant powdered mashed potatoes? So let me just make this very clear. If I'm selling this instant powdered Echinacea, is it going to be anything closer resembling Echinacea? Because what they do to make the extract, they collect the roots, they're dried, They buy any material they like because it doesn't matter what the quality of the material is, because you're not actually selling a herb, you're selling a standardized compound that contains 4% of substance X. So what the actual original material is doesn't really matter, as long as you've got this 4% compound X in it. So, you know, they chop it all up, they make a liquid of it, and it's evaporated off and spray dried. It's exactly the same process you used to make instant mashed potato. Exactly the same process. So, again, if you were to put 2 people for a year in a room and feed one group fresh vegetables from the garden that were freshly dug up, and then the other group for a year you fed them powdered instant vegetables, which group would still be alive 12 months? I'm trying not to be critical of the standardization process. I'm just trying to explain how it's done. And to point out that the logic behind it is somewhat flawed. Unfortunately, what's happened in the herbal industry, the drug companies have... I'll tell you a little story. I was talking a few months ago to the president of a big drug company in Montreal. And I said to him, you know, I have questions for you. What made you guys get into herbs? He said, well, we got into these herbal extracts and we saw no growth in chemical drugs for 10 years. We haven't had any. And we see everybody's buying these herbs, so we want to get into it. And why the standardized products? Well, we want to offer the consumer the same kind of product, the same... Now, I mean, you know, we live in a very interesting world, a world that everything we do, we allow a particular group of people to interfere in our involvement. That's the financial community. Now imagine you've got 100 tons of Echinacea that I'm selling to you in a little bottle here, usually retails for about $10. Now if I'm going to make a standardized extract out of that, how is it possibly going to be as good a value as a simple, because of the cost of manufacturing? In other words, I'm value adding that to that product. Does everyone follow me? You know, I have this massive equipment and machinery, I've got all these tests, government departments to support, etc. So, which kind of product is going to be better value? The one that's closer to the farm, the one that's closer. And this is where the holistic part of health and healing all comes in, because if you want a healthy lifestyle, and you want healthy food and healthy herbs, the best thing you can do is to pick herbs and foods as close as possible to their natural state that you would find them in the environment. Makes perfect common sense, isn't it? And there's really no need to pay lots of extra money and involve the financial community and everyone else in the process, because at $200 a kilo for your Echinacea extract, you're going to be paying for all that massive production, plus the profits and support of all little bits and pieces, when you could A, be growing it in the garden yourself, or buying it from a company that just puts it simply in a bottle.
What's that dried? And how override to make that dried?
No, the way it was made, the Echinacea root, well actually it wasn't Echinacea roots, they were too cheap to use Echinacea roots. They just used bits and pieces, leaves, in fact any substance that contained Echinacea, and they put them in a big vat, and the vat's warmed up, and there's alcohol put in the vat, and all these things are extracted, and the alcohol is evaporated through a spray dryer. That's how it's done. Has anyone tasted that product? Has anyone tasted that product? Does it taste anything like Echinacea? No? It doesn't taste anything like Echinacea, does it? You like it? Oh yeah, it's sweet, isn't it? But does it taste like Echinacea? No, it doesn't.
Yeah, because they found that eating it raw would do nature's anything.
The problem with Echinacea, you can make a dried tea with it. If you would dry the roots, you can make a tea with it. But Echinacea is one of those herbs that works better fresh. I'll give you an example. Anyone ever made pesto sauce out of fresh basil? Delicious, isn't it? You ever try to make it out of dried basil?
No, I like it. I wouldn't even attend.
No, you wouldn't. No, it would be horrible, wouldn't it? Echinacea is the same kind of plant. At its most potent when it's fresh. And some herbs are more potent when they're dry. Like, let me be very clear about this. If you were to dry, for example, a root like golden seal, one of the reasons golden seal is a popular medicinal herb, it contains a couple of substances, hydrastine and berberine, which have specific physiological effects on the body. And if you dry those, yes, you'll have a more concentrated amount of those substances in the dried herb. In the same way as if you dry your mashed potatoes, you'll have weight per volume, far more potato for you, a little bit of weight before you add the water. But you won't. Our bodies and our digestive systems have developed over time to absorb nutrients from the foods that we've evolved with. And if you start to change the balance and level of substances there, then you're not going to get the same. It's not quite the same how it's absorbed in the body. Our company sells these products to practitioners all over North America. Herbal practitioners will always choose fresh herbal products made from fresh herbs, in most cases, and they will almost always choose simple tinctures. When you make a simple tincture, when we make the echinacea, what we basically do is pulverize the roots. We use a low temperature cutting machine. It's a bit like a meat grinder, and it breaks it up very, very into small pieces, and then these are steeped in ethanol, and you get a very, very thick, like a mush, I guess, and then it's put through a hydraulic press. So what you're getting is basically the juice from inside the roots, and it's very, very close to what you would get if you were drinking or chewing a root. That's why if I had a root for you to taste, you'd be able to taste how close. I don't know, have you ever tasted fresh roots? Wasn't this pretty close to the fresh roots?
Yeah, Purpurea was just the same.
Yeah. Oh, you haven't grown the other cereal yet?
No.
Okay.
I have.
Yeah. If you want to, to get back to growing again, if you want to grow angustifolia, I would recommend growing it, but you've got to be really patient. It's very hard to germinate. Most of the echinaceas require stratification for germination. Are you familiar with where you put them in the freezer? And what you've got to do is, the best time to plant echinacea is to take the seeds in the fall from the plants you have and put those seeds immediately into prepared ground at that time of the fall and start in the spring. That's the best way to do it. The second best way to do it is to collect your seeds and then put them in the freezer, leave them in the freezer for 2 or 3 months over the winter, and then take them out a month or so before you've actually planted them. There's all sorts of methods. People mix them up with sand, with soil. There's different ways to do it. But you really have to give the seeds that sort of freezing process. It sort of tricks them into thinking there's a winter gone by. If you put them in a shelf in your kitchen and then you try and plant them in the spring, you probably won't see any come up. And Purpurea is the easiest one to grow and germinate, and the biggest. You'll have big plants right up here with lots of flowers. And the angustifolia is very difficult. You really have to grow that one very carefully. If you're interested in what kind of soil, you should really try and approximate as much as possible the environment in which the wild echinacea lives. And it's a prairie plant. If you would have a map of North America, you can imagine it like this. It would sort of come down a bit like this into the central plains and up. So, maybe I'll give you a little trick actually that we use. What you can do is you can sprinkle a small amount of wood ashes, and particularly for angustifolia. If you think about it, what happens is you often get prairie fires, and they change the alkalinity and nature of the soil, and echinacea responds very well to that. Very small amounts, and sprinkled in the soil. Echinacea purpurea. If you're going to grow Echinacea purpurea, don't let it get waterlogged. Very important, because it can start to rot. But at the same time, you've got to make sure it doesn't dry out, because it will wilt in a drought kind of scenario. So basically you want the kind of soil we have, I guess, well drained. Which one's that you've got?
I think we've had the
Is that the angustifolia? Yeah. Oh yeah.
Has anybody tried them?
No, not this side. They haven't tried the angustifolia. Have you guys tried the other ones? Quite different, aren't they? So you could now tell them all apart, right? Oh, I was going to give you a test. Oh. And in fact, now you taste all these, you should be able to tell when you go into a store whether a product's any good. Okay, fertilizer. It's a great question. Last year, I had a young man come up to me. He was from right up near Algonquin Park. He said, I've got some echinacea. It's organic, beautiful echinacea, and you know, it's had manure and everything, so I went out to see it. Man, they were the biggest echinacea plants I ever saw in my life. The leaves were the size of palm leaves. No good. No good at all. Because one of the problems with medicinal herb plants, you don't want to overfeed them and grow them. The compounds that the herbs produce, medicinal compounds, are produced to help protect those plants from the environment. Does anyone grow grapes for wine? Okay. Well, you'll know if you grow grapes, the very best wines are made from grapes. They have to struggle a little bit. There's lots of macro mineral salts in the soil. They're not overfed. It intensifies the quality of the elements in the grape. Herbs are exactly the same. So unfortunately, this young man, he had this beautiful 2 acres. It looked beautiful, but I couldn't use it. It just wasn't, you know, wasn't much good. Really big, nice green plant. Had that really nice nitrate flavor. The 3 roots of echinacea are quite different. Purpurea produces a ball root, about the size of my fist after 3 years. If anyone's had it in the garden, they'll know it's like it doesn't go very deep into the ground. So as you can imagine, not very drought resistant. You have to, you know, make sure it doesn't dry out too much. The Echinacea angustifolia, after 3 to 5 years, produces a taproot. I've seen them go this deep, like this. So I hope that answers your question. And the pallida roots are somewhere in between. They're sort of straggly roots with little hairs. The purpurea roots are hairy with lots of fine little hairs in them. Whereas the angustifolia looks very much like a burdock root or a carrot. Very, very similar. If you do a cross-section under a microscope, it's even more interesting. If you do a cross-section of the purpurea root, you'll see this very jagged, very unformed collection of cells, like a random clump of cells all together. If you get a pallida root, you get a collection of cells. It's a little bit weird. If you get an Echinacea angustifolia, it's very rigidly ordered in geometric shapes. Quite interesting, because obviously you can see why that is. One is structured in order in one direction. It's a very easy way to tell them apart. You can also tell them apart by cutting a cross-section of an angustifolia and purpurea root. They have a most unusual colour. If you make a tincture extract of Echinacea pallida, that's the one without the tingle, and you squeeze the roots, you'll get this turquoise-coloured liquid. It's a bright turquoise colour. It's about the colour of the inside of your coat there, like green. Very, very similar. I've never seen any other plants in nature. Most unusual. The Echinacea angustifolia produces a bright electric blue compound, and the pallida produces a sort of brown gum. The purpurea produces a sort of brown gum. I've never seen an angustifolia with white leaf. There are 7 or 8 varieties of Echinacea. Yeah, I've heard of some of these, and there's some, for instance, there's a Echinacea paradoxica, which has a yellow flower. That's very unusual.
I'd like you to talk about the mixing of the different Echinaceas.
Oh, okay.
They're sort of
So one of the problems we have today is the most potent varieties that we find in the wild are not as common as they once were. And this is because all varieties of Echinacea will cross with them. And this is a very critical issue, because if you're selling Echinacea angustifolia, that's what you should be selling, Echinacea angustifolia. And if you grow them all together without keeping them separate and stopping them from cross-fertilizing, you'll just have this mixed mumbo-jumbo of varieties, and they won't be consistent. And one of the things we do is we get our seeds from different locations from certified growers, and we blend together. In this bottle, there are 7 or 8 genome types of Echinacea that we've blended together. We have the Echinacea we grow angustifolia, pallida, and purpurea ourselves. We also purchase fresh roots from the Midwest and other parts of Canada, different genome varieties, and blending them all together produces a very complex tincture. And obviously, it gives it a far broader spectrum in its effectiveness. If you just continue to grow It's okay to grow it for your own use in the sense, but if you're doing it commercially, you want to have the highest quality product, and it's a very good idea to mix them together like that. And you certainly cannot keep growing angustifolia, for example, if you grow Purpurea or Polida anywhere close to it, because they will cross. You will not get a pure variety of Echinacea. Also, you can blend Echinacea with other herbs. Echinacea is an immune herb. I brought with me some products here that we manufacture. We make other products in Echinacea, obviously. I have a product here, an Immunity Plus Tonic. It contains Echinacea angustifolia, but it also contains other herbs that work synergistically. In other words, each herb enhances the effect of the other to have a more powerful effect on the immune system. For instance, this particular formula here contains Echinacea angustifolia. It contains calendula flowers, which is an excellent lymphatic and anti-inflammatory herb. It contains Cleaver's herb, which is particularly good for stimulating the lymphatic system. So if you blend them together in this synergistic manner, you can actually get better value for your Echinacea. Echinacea by itself is okay, and it's a great, simple standalone remedy for everyone to keep. By the way, it's a great remedy for insect stings and bee stings, and for toothache, because I don't know if it tingles so much, if you rub it on a sting, or you can imagine it would take away some of the pain and feeling from that. So I think, was that pretty well covered that one? Yeah.
Okay, I think we can buy some.
Oh yeah, I got a bunch of things here. Okay, I'll give you the quick sales pitch and I'll get back on to the Echinacea. I brought some things with me, some Echinacea I've got lots. Most of the Echinacea we sell, it usually retails in the store between $10 and $12. Whenever I do these kind of things, I now sell these things for $6 even, which is a very good value. Anyone's ever bought Echinacea knows how expensive it is. I've got lots of it with me, so if anyone would like some, they're $6 each when I
How much would you recommend to take it?
Okay. If you look at the instruction sheet, it tells you, roughly, Echinacea is best taken 10 to 20 drops, 2 or 3 times a day. Let me see if I can run into this, but it's a little bit ethereal here. The best time to take Echinacea is when you don't need it. You have to listen to your body, and let me ask everyone a question. How many times have you come down with a cold or the flu, and you said, I knew I was going to get that, because the day before you had that feeling that told you that's when you have to take your Echinacea at that point. Because that's the time if you stimulate your immune system, just at that point, you can just get over that one, and that's what happens. So that's the best time to take it. If you wanted to go with a generic time to take Echinacea, I would suggest that you took Echinacea at the change of the seasons. That's the time quite often when people come down with colds and flu. In the spring, for example, after the winter's ended, after Christmas, and other times of self-indulgence, and in the fall when the weather changes, and anytime you sort of feel that cold. It's a very excellent remedy. If you're going in an airplane, take a teaspoon of Echinacea before you get on the plane. Because, those guys are so cheap, they recycle all that air and recycle all the bacteria and viruses with it.
Is it effective at all if you have a cold or something?
Echinacea is effective if you have a cold. It can lessen the symptoms, but it's far more effective if you can use it. Catch it. Listen to your body, that's the key.
What about shelf life? How do you store it?
Shelf life of Echinacea. This is one of the advantages of a tincture. Tinctures have a shelf life of between 2 and 5 years. Ideally, you should use one of these products within 2 years. They will last up to 5, but the place to store them is not in a refrigerator, but in a cool place where you would keep root vegetables. The key is to avoid temperature changes. Every time the temperature changes, it changes the Echinacea. It's like keeping wine in the cellar, When the temperature changes, it drops the precipitate, and things change. So keep it at a constant, cool temperature, but not in the refrigerator.
So room temperature.
Room temperature is a little too warm.
If you have no choice.
Oh, if you have no choice, the coolest place usually in someone's home is under the sink or perhaps under the sink in the bathroom. Those are cool places. Okay, the capsules. Now, we never used to do capsules. We started to manufacture capsules very recently. The reason we never used to do them is dried echinacea is not so effective. And the only kind of echinacea that is effective really as a dried herb, or the most effective, is Echinacea angustifolia. And until 2 years ago, we didn't have a reliable source of good quality angustifolia. Now, our company has a good source of freshly dried. What we do, the Echinacea angustifolia is harvested in the fall. It's dried very carefully, and then it's powdered just at that moment and put into the capsules. If you're going to use Echinacea capsules, I would recommend only ones that have angustifolia in them. The purpura is not so effective when it's dry. There's my little girl's getting tired here. I have a little sleeping remedies for you. Echinacea angustifolia is very good for allergies actually. It's good for skin complaints. Purpura is not so good for those things. Purpura is not bound to cold, things like that.
Yeah, we have some growing. It's best fresh. Would I be able to dig up a clump in the winter and take it in the house and eat it?
Yeah, you can do that if you want to do that. I think the best thing to do, while fresh is best, it's easier to get a clump, to clean it and wash it. I'll quickly run through how to do it. If you wait until the fall when the plant dies back, chop it off, you know, about this far above the ground, dig up your root, clean all, save the little fine hairs that come on it. Very important with purpura, you really need to save them. And then chop the roots up into pieces, and then if you have you can steep it in alcohol. Use 40% alcohol. You can purchase it from the liquor store. It's called Alcohol, I think, or you can use vodka. Or if you've got lots of money, Napoleon brandy, whatever you feel up to doing, okay? And chop it up into small pieces. You can use a blender if you want. Only a blender can be a bit harsh, but you can chop it. Use a food processor perhaps. And then, if you get a 1 liter jar about so big, you can half fill it with Echinacea root, chopped up fine, and then top it up. And then keep the jar in your kitchen, shake it 3 or 4 times a day. It must be kept in a warm place. And after about a month, you can just get a cloth, an old bed sheet that's broken, and pour it through and squeeze it tight. Like, you know, like you would make that kind of food product, I guess. And then save the liquid and throw away the bits and pieces. And that tincture will easily last you 12 months or so. I know I'm doing myself out of business here, but I'd much rather see you guys make your own, because not everybody's going to want to do it. People are going to want to buy it. Mine has a fancy label, so maybe that helps.
What are those other things besides the bottle?
Oh, these are formulas here. Some of them are made with Echinacea and other herbs. We have an energy-giving formula. I have a prostrate formula here.
Okay.
I guess that was the wrong one, wasn't it? I have a digestive formula, all sorts of different formulas. And some tonics here.
What about a middle-aged toxic female? I smoke cigarettes, etc.
Oh, I thought you were going to ask for your mother. Yes, I have a detox formula too. I think so. Yes, I have a lymphatic formula and a detox. A nerve tonic. I'm going to take that in a minute.
Does that mean I have to buy different kinds?
Yeah, there's different ones. Circulatory.
And what's the price of those other things?
These things again will be $6 today. Yeah, so I'm going to thank Richters and everyone.
Sorry to disturb. Just one more question. Insect pests. Are there any insect pests?
Oh, yeah, interesting question. Echinacea. We plant our Echinacea in rows. We have them in rows, you know, like 100 or so plants or whatever. And over a year, we might lose, over 3 years, we might lose between 5 and 10% of them. Usually we would lose them to the little borers that come up, you know, little grubs that eat the inside of everyone. Anyone ever grown things knows what they look like. They like them because they're very sweet roots, very tasty. But as for direct insect damage, we've never had a problem. In fact, the opposite is the case. The Echinacea attracts a wide variety of insects. When the OCI inspector came to visit our location last year, he came over to me and he said, you know, we've never seen so many predatory and different insects here as I've seen, because we have so many different herbs and flowers, so there's so many different ones. So we've never had a problem. If you like monarch butterflies, then plant Echinacea. Because I'll see this picture here? That is not a dead butterfly that we struck on. That's a real butterfly. And there's another story to that, but I won't go into it today because it could get me going for a libel and slander suit, but I'll leave that.
If you monocrop with a lot, or do you mix in?
No, all ours is all mixed. We have small little plots of, I mean, that's the old certified organic. Now, commercial Echinacea, if it's not certified organic, I'll quickly tell you how they grow it. Alright? What they do is, a lot of it's grown in sections. Anyone know what a section is in the Midwest? It's a massive, 20 acres of area. That's a bit less. That's a lot of area. And they have a central pivoting irrigation system that goes around. And they spray it with a pre-emergent herbicide in the spring. Because if you think about it, you've got a 3-year plant that's grown in a field, it's going to have a lot of competition, growing around it. So how do you deal with that? So you spray it with these pre-emergent herbicides. These herbicides are not very healthy things to be spraying on your Echinacea. That's why it's very important when you buy Echinacea products that you get ones that are certified as organic. Not just a final word on certified organic. Does anyone read Consumers Reports magazine?
I do.
Did you see the January issue? Okay, in the January issue of Consumers Union magazine, for the first time ever in North America, they went out and bought 1,000 pounds of certified organic vegetables, 1,000 pounds of vegetables sold as organic, and 1,000 pounds of conventional vegetables. And it was very interesting. That analyzed the pesticides and other kind of wonderful substances that we get in our food today. The product that was just conventional had over 48 toxic chemicals. Right, really serious toxic poisons. The product that was sold as organic had about 22 different chemicals, a lot less. The certified organic had 4 chemicals in it. So what they said at the end of their article was, the Consumers Union represents millions of Americans and Canadians. These are very conventional, normal kind of people, not granola chompers like me. Very conventional, normal people who live in the real world. And they said, well, while we would not want to say that organic food is safer or better for you than conventional food products, they said that if you wanted to limit your intake of toxic poisons and chemicals, we suggest you buy certified organic food.
Well, they're not sponsored by anybody. So
No, it's totally independent.
Be very open about it.
Well, they didn't say that certified organic food was better, because every time you say that, the corporate food industry takes you to court. I mean, we all know it's better, I'll say it. Any corporate lawyers here for the food industry? I mean, I know the problem here. It is better. I wouldn't give my children all that conventional food. So, what I'd like to say now is my time is, thank you very much everyone for coming. I always feel it. If you'd like some tinctures and other things, feel free to pop along. I don't have any chains, so
At Richters, it's not just a garden, it's a whole new world. For herb plants, seeds, veggies, and more, visit us at richters.com or call 1-800-668-4372.